Hello everybody, I want to give you a couple of details that are important when considering Theory X and Theory Y and units of analysis and how they pertain to Theory X and Theory Y. So if you look at Theory X and of course the management and leader assumptions about people in terms of lazy and not willing to put in the work or what have you. The key with the unit of analysis with Theory X leaders is that they're looking at the individual as a unit of analysis. They're not looking at the system as a whole. They're not looking at all the component parts of a system that influence how people behave and act and decide within an organizational environment. They're simply looking at the individual. And the reason for that is the feedback and the data collection that we can actually see, observe, or whatever. Even if we interpret it incorrectly, there's a lot of data that we can immediately and usually, without any kind of discernment or discipline, receive feedback and start to analyze and assess and come to conclusions and assumptions and conclusions about what we're seeing. And typically the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, well, we need more training, we need this, we need that, whatever. And it's fine to deal with the individual as a unit of analysis in terms of, like we talked about with Carl, what's going on in Carl's life. Is there any other background information, things he's experiencing that may explain his behavior? We can look at Carl's from the character lens in terms of is Carl an otherwise good person in terms of his status as an employee, or is he character-wise really, really bad? And we talked about if a person has very poor character, it doesn't matter how much training you pour into them, the character still has to be dealt with. So the individual unit of analysis is important, but we can't stop there. Theory Y has that opposite assumption about employees that, hey, if you create the conditions whereby they can thrive, you can basically just allow them to do what they do, and they're going to produce great results. That requires a different unit of analysis, a systemic unit of analysis. In fact, so I would put myself in a default setting in terms of when I saw things going bad, going wrong, not being effective, decisions that were being made in the field by my deputies, that, okay, this is not right. My first unit of analysis was the system. So the question, is the system naturally producing what I'm observing? If you take the culture, the training, the experience, the staffing, if you take all these variables, the history of what we've been doing and the lack of scrutiny in terms of here's been our practices thus far, but nobody's really gone back and said, well, why? I tend to do a systemic analysis first and go, okay, is this something that we can expect to see because that's what the system demanded of this person? And then, of course, I want to address those variables. And then I'll, of course, go to the individual, but the power of that is that the employees know, from my position as a leader, they know I'm going to start with a systemic explanation first. And then if I discover that the individual is a character flaw, a character issue, then I'll obviously deal with that through discipline. If it's a training issue, I'll usually try to do that with training. So the idea is that Theory Y requires us to really take a systemic analysis in each part of that system on a broader scale and not just stick to a unit of analysis and let me just focus on the person. Both are necessary, both are required. But again, my practice and my behavior is going to determine or let my people know whether I'm Theory Y or Theory X. If I start with the systemic explanations first, they're going to understand that I'm more of a Theory Y manager or leader. If I start with, hey, what's wrong with you? Well, there's your Theory X. Okay, so that's the unit of analysis aspect of it. The other aspect of it is what people don't tend to think about is that Theory Y can actually be used to produce bad character and bad outcomes. And so you might have a system wherein the old school law enforcement mentality of, kick butt, take names, and take people to jail, and nothing wrong with taking people to jail, constitutionally speaking, but the idea was, we rule out here, we're the boss, ain't nobody going to get one over on us, and we're going to, take charge and take names. And then you have a situation where all kinds of people are going to jail, but nobody's asking, well, how did they get there? I mean, we had a guy that was violating Fourth Amendment rights left and right, and it's funny because his peers knew about it, but up the chain of command they didn't until somebody spoke up and said something about it. He had all kinds of methamphetamine arrests, but he had no probable cause to actually reach into their pockets and start searching them for dope. So, but again, the system was thinking, hey, great arrest, and this deputy was about to get an award until somebody said, hey, Lieutenant, you realize what he's doing to get those arrests, right? Well, no. You can have this Theory Y environment with the wrong character, the wrong behavior patterns, and the wrong outcomes. So you got to be very, very cautious about that. And in law enforcement, I've seen a tendency toward that. I've seen different stations, certain stations that were absolutely professional, ethical, moral, They had top-notch ideologies in terms of honoring people's rights, but taking people to jail that needed to go to jail. And then I saw stations where, okay, this is kind of bad. It's fixable, but there's some issues here. And then one of the stations that I worked at, it was horrific. The culture, the attitude, let's just either ignore people, blow them off, or take people to jail, or detain people without cause. Blow off domestic violence victims. Who cares about them? It was a situation where deputies were basically calling the sheriff and saying, "I don't like this leader. They're holding me accountable. Get rid of him." And the sheriff would. Theory Y environment. As long as you held that culture up of we're king, we are the ones that do what we do, we make our decisions and we take actions, and nobody's going to hold us accountable and tell us differently. And when I walked into that particular station, I was horrified. I mean, you got to be kidding me that this is the culture here? Now, we believe the best about our employees. Yeah, but you believe the best about your employees to the wrong ends by the wrong means. Everybody's happy. Within that system, the public you're serving isn't happy, your people are happy. But is that the point? We want our people to be happy as they're pursuing legitimate means or legitimate ends by legitimate means. Pursuing the right things for the right reasons with the right approach to the benefit of the public. So you got to watch out for that. And of course, my experience, I was the one who's like, hey, what the heck is going on here? And of course, I got punished for it. I got retaliated against for it. It was pretty brutal. But I just wanted to make those two distinctions for you that, again, check your units of analysis in terms of when you're trying to discern a problem, and then be sure that understand that Theory Y can be inappropriately used. So use it right, make sure you have the right ends and means in mind, and make sure when you're analyzing problems that you're not only looking at the individual, but even more so, more importantly, the system as a whole. Because again, in the other videos that I talk about, the model which basically drives people into hurrying up, the system produced those outcomes. The system produced those decision-making environments. And even a situation where, the San Bernardino deputy pepper spraying the guy with Down syndrome, it would be interesting in terms of he might have, I don't know the guy, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to hear that people would say that, oh, he's a good guy, he's ethical, moral. Can you have ethical and moral people that have been inappropriately programmed and not taught to think and reason, but taught just to react? Yeah, you can. And so the idea is that, some of these people are horrified in terms of, I never really thought of this, and yeah, I did something wrong and it was bad. And I'm not speaking to this case individual, I'm just speaking in terms of, don't be surprised if you find people that are otherwise known as ethical and moral that do stupid stuff. And then go, okay, was it because this guy's low on the character scale, or was he programmed to do this? Think about that. So you have to evaluate both. And again, on an ending note, I have dealt with people with low moral character. I mean, at the very bottom, which makes you wonder, and the common question that we ask in law enforcement, who did his background investigation? I mean, he could have been, hid his real character then, or his character could have deteriorated over time. But this guy was so atrocious in terms of his character. And it's funny because all these complaints kept coming in, and this guy had to do 56 pages of narrative, single-spaced, on an internal affairs investigation on this guy for all the people that he pissed off in a 2-week window. 56 pages, single-spaced narrative for a 2-week period where he was pissing 8 different people off by violating policy. And everybody knew this guy's character and reputation, but nobody wanted to spend the time to hold him accountable. So in that particular case, was it the individual? Absolutely. Might there have been some problems in terms of the systemic programming? Yes. But he was so corrupted in his character that the other stuff didn't matter. And in his case, it needed to be progressive discipline up to and including termination if he didn't change his character. So let me know if you have any questions about that, need further clarification, or if I can help you with anything else. Thank you.